I had, maybe my 800th conversation with a parent today whose kids are struggling, eating disorders, depression. Yeah, and I keep, the pattern is just so unmistakable, Michael. I forwarded my buddy, the person I was talking to, your 2016 article, a multiple page article that described, the illness that can come from being in school, and it's just so sad to hear.
Yeah, it's horrifying. And it's complex because there are social and cultural and social media, so there are other factors. But I think school is a big part of it, and healthy connection and a sense of purpose does make almost everything better almost all the time. I think what people who've not yet seen behind the veil, they seem to be unaware of how damaging the meaninglessness is and the lack of community. I mean, some kids have community in school, and I actually think one of the great things about kids that are involved in sports and some extracurriculars is sometimes there's a great sense of community there. But I think there are a lot of kids who are not part of any of those communities and are just kind of, left behind or bullied or, none of the above kind of thing. One thing that I often tell parents is, if you go to a regular high school, you kind of have to be a geek or a jock or a, whatever, prep or whatever. You're kind of forced into these categories. And actually, I've known of, parents of Black boys who, either have to be with these kind of Black boys, or if they're with those white kids, and if they're none of the above, they're just, ostracized, and it's hard.
Yeah, I actually did research years ago about, something called the man box, where particularly for Black boys, if they feel like they don't fit in the very tight, rigid, kind of hypersexual, money, power, physical strength, sexual prowess, if that's not you, then you fall outside the man box, and therefore you're subject to every ridicule, you're subject to every indignity. And in fact, it's those kids that are often the ones that actually fall in love with reading or fall in love with something else, because they've given up on this idea of this kind of hyper masculine, description, and they go on and do great things. And it's quite unfortunate that it comes to that.
Yeah. I went to relatively small, relatively good high schools, but I didn't find my people till I went to college, where it's okay to be an intellectual. You just have to kind of pretend and find people to hang out with. And, it's funny. Somebody described Dallas as where, the ultimate status is to be a football player or cheerleader, and graduation gifts are either a sports car or a boob job. And that seems symbolic of, okay, if that's what culture is there.
Wow.
Wow. I'm sure it's not entirely fair, but yeah, these stereotypes sometimes have something to them.
Yeah. Some stereotypes are there for reasons, but yeah, I'm in Houston, so we don't. What's that, Kat?
No, I'm just saying that it's not just restricted to the male gender. There are a lot of different stereotypes, and I always found that just going through my 20s, when I was trying to undo all those coping mechanisms that we learned during school just to cope. I mean, we're pretty resilient as human beings, and we adapt ourselves to all sorts of situations that aren't natural to us, just so we can fit in and be accepted. Right. And because of that, we've masked our complete identity that has to be rediscovered at some point, if the child or the human is actually going to do what they're meant to be on earth doing. Right. So for me, it's like, if you can just get them out of that situation, then they don't have to unlearn right before they can start their life. And that unlearning process can take a long time. It's such a waste of time. And just by taking them out of a system that you can, just think of how many years you'd save if you don't have to go back and unlearn all that stuff.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast today, The Hidden Brain. You guys ever listen to that?
Mm-mm.
Okay, Shankar Vedantam is the host, and he's talking about all these different ways that our brains trick us, and today he was talking about something called useful delusions. And these are the delusions that we tell ourselves that allow us to get through life without having, just, becoming basket cases. And so as he was talking about it, I'm feverishly writing down around the delusions related to education, the delusion that, grades matter. We all know what school is like. You memorize as much as you can, you get your grade, and then you forget it as quickly as you can. But we delude ourselves into thinking that is somehow learning, because for those that can do that well, they're rewarded, right? Rewarded with valedictorian, they're rewarded with straight A report cards that everyone praises. But that's a delusion that your child is actually learning, and we do that because it actually helps us. It helps us to feel better about where our kids are going all day.
Well, and going in a different direction, but somewhat related, I really think that in a way, school, those who like school and are good at school then impose it on others. I wanted this game. Everybody should be good at this game. Let's force everybody to play this game. But what if you don't want to play this game? What if it's not your game?
Well, not just that. Let's say you're not in the top 15% that's successful, right? Well, let's say you're in the bottom 50%. So we're talking about half the population.
Yeah.
Right. Then they're going to be feeling less than, and it's just such a rigged competition. It's completely skewed to a certain kind of brain, and all of these negative effects that might seem trivial if it was a one-time thing, the cumulative effect of this constant reinforcement of you're not as good, or you're not smart, or you're not this, right, is extremely damaging. I mean, it takes years and years and years to unlearn that kind of self-doubt. And as far as people reaching their potential, you're just cutting people off at the, at the chase. Yeah.
You're talking about the ones that recover. They're also the ones that commit suicide, become addicted, become clinically depressed, or worse, homeless people. Who knows? That's why I want to do this study on adverse schooling experiences, because under the best of conditions, eventually you recover after a decade. But there are millions of kids whose lives are over one way or another.
Interesting. So is that something you want to research? Adverse educational experiences or adverse schooling?
Big time. Yeah. And I guess you must know about the ACE study, being in healthcare. I think we urgently need the same thing in schooling. And so if you think you can design it or get donors behind it, let's go.
That is really interesting, because we did this last week, I think, right? How many of you guys had a terrible experience in middle school, right? And every hand in the room shoots up. And, from bullying to just feeling like the girls had, some girls were curvy, others were late bloomers, right? All these things just cause a person to feel less than, and then they hide. And it's not until, post high school, maybe years, a decade or more, that they realize, oh yeah, there's something to me. That's just so interesting.
Well, again, under the best conditions, in some cases, it's lifelong damage.
Right, no question.
But go ahead,
I just wanted to say, well, we put these kids in cohorts of 100, 200, 300 of the same age children. And we all know that middle school is just such a sensitive period. And always when you put the same age children together, you're going to get extremes at either end that are very, very negative and damaging.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to have a whole section of the population who've been bullied and set up.
Well, and I like to celebrate different kinds of skills. So right now I'm just thinking of the talker. So last Friday I met an executive coach, incredibly successful. He's coached people around from the world. And he said that he got fired from a job as a grocery store bagger because he talked too much. And I can see, yeah, this guy talks too much. And hey, talking a lot is one of the world's greatest gifts. My wife talks a lot. She got in trouble in school all the time for talking too much. Now she's a world-renowned speaker. So think of all the kids that just have blabbermouths, and what incredible talent is getting squelched because, hey, shut up.
Right.
I'm not one of those.
So Michael, so this research, the problem with that research is that it requires somebody to fund it and be comfortable that the outcome might negatively reflect on schools.
Big time.
Right.
Well, I know plenty of donors who would fund it. For me, I think the next step is kind of credibility. So if we had credible researchers, and I've talked to Peter Singer a little bit about this, and he's sympathetic. I would say he's not kind of an entrepreneurial leader. He's a brilliant thought leader. But yeah, if you know, and I've found a few people who sort of play this roles, but I think we'd need to have like 5 or 10 really credible researchers who'd be willing to take this on. And
I'm going to send a note right now to one at Rice University.
Excellent. Yeah, I'd be, if you can recruit him or her, and maybe they can get some others, I'd be happy to start talking to them, and let's design it. I think first we need to have a proposal, but with a credible proposal, I know lots of donors who have very little sympathy for the public schools.
Yeah. How interesting. Well,
it could be we'll find some schools are good. Maybe there's a certain kind of, actually, of course, part of my agenda here is I think, say, Montessori and Waldorf would come out better, but maybe not. Sudbury come out better, but maybe not. I'd love to see maybe, actually, one of the things about religious schools, I mentioned that article, is that people say at a Catholic school, Catholic students do better, but maybe non-Catholic students do worse. And of course, often gay LGBTQ students do worse. And so it could be that there's sort of a fit issue, but I'd want to bring it all out.
Yeah, I agree with you, Michael. I have been thinking about this a lot. This is my passion, like trying to create environments where people thrive. And I pulled both my children out of Montessori schools. They're beautiful schools, but, I had a very, very, very active son. And he was in a classroom where they had to really concentrate a lot, and they were doing a lot of fine motor, they're using little beads and cards, and he had a really hard time not climbing the pole in the classroom and doing donkey kicks around his mat, and the beads would go everywhere and the cards would go everywhere. Like, he should have been in a different environment where he could move a lot more and do a lot more gross motor movement. And like, they don't give you a manual when your child is born. You've got really no idea what is the best environment. I mean, the best that we can do as parents is really, really observe and then find out as much as possible, because there are learning environments out there that would suit, I think, pretty much every person. I just don't think as parents we know what they are.
Well, I often think about what would it be like to have Robin Williams in a classroom. I think Robin Williams was brilliant, but yeah, he said he would be on the desk, under the desk, over the desk. Every teacher, Robin Williams is a teacher's nightmare and an absolute comic genius.
Right. Well, teacher's nightmare in the structure that we have. I mean, if the teacher was able to say, hey, every day you're going to put on a 10-minute skit. So what's your, are you working on it? What's the status of the skit? Give it to me first, and I can give you some tweaks and right that. But again, we have to make sure he's studying Greek architecture and Texas history.
No, it's irrelevant. Yeah, I think we'd actually see a lot more specialization of schools and educators. Right now there are gymnastic coaches that are amazing. There are all these specialized coaches where kids start at the age of 3 or 4 and become brilliant. But yeah, for comic genius or for sales genius or for, all sorts of genius, yeah, either you fit into the system or you don't, and maybe your parents recognize you and support you. That's where, you're right, Matt, the parent, I think especially for kids who don't fit into the system, the parents there's an urgent need for parents to say, hey, no matter what the school system says, I see my child's genius, and we're going to create a vision for how to crank this thing up.
Yeah. I want to ask you guys a couple questions. So I'm looking at writing a post, and it's one that I am struggling with a little bit. But the title of the post is something like, my son is a valedictorian. Why am I sad? So my son is a valedictorian. And every single time it's mentioned, people always congratulate him. And I feel a real conflict, because I got to watch how he had to conform and quiet his own inner yearnings in order to complete assignments that had no relevance whatsoever in order to keep that grade. I also watched him not take some courses that he was interested in because his advisor was saying, hey, you're number one in the class. If you take that course, it's not a 5-hour course, it's a 4-hour course. You may get an A, but you actually may drop in your standing. So help me think through this as a parent, as well as someone who's seen through the fog of school and realizes that being a valedictorian is actually, not necessarily something to be celebrated.
So first, can you and he joke about it? Ideally, my ideal would, no joking. What would happen if you tried to talk about it like that?
So, for 4 years, he's been just praised for mediocre work. And, I've seen the work, and I'm saying, wow, what we see in our house is, when someone says I have an A, I say, well, was your effort 90% or higher?
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer is no, then I'm like, well, it's going to be hard for me to celebrate that A if you put in 20% effort. That to me is not something I want to celebrate. But that's been going on for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Got huge upside, right? So yeah, it's a sensitive spot.
Mm-hmm. In some ways, I think of it as a game. And in some ways, I could say, great that you played that game and won that game. Are there different games you might consider playing? And in some ways, I could almost be more concerned about, do you want to play that game in college again? Or are you going to play that game in graduate school? Is this the game forever? I mean, would he acknowledge there's a bit of a game to it?
Oh yeah. Yeah, he knows the game. Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
What about challenge? What does he want to do to challenge himself? Does he want to rise to challenges?
So it started, and that's actually, again, part of this post is that COVID, he just blossomed in COVID, right? He started taking risks. He started doing things that didn't require someone else to tell him to do. He learned how to play the piano and the ukulele this year.
Mm-hmm.
Really well, actually. He'll actually compose stuff now. He was interested in doing this. He applied for this international cultural and language experience where he would learn Arabic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where that came from, but this dude is like starting to now blossom. But for 3 straight years, he was like, okay, I need to package myself and conform.
Mm-hmm.
So COVID was a real blessing. So yes, looks like he's starting to break out of it now, but I think that's a good question, Kath.
So I know
somebody. Oh, sorry, Michael, please.
Okay, quickly though, I know somebody who was he was high school valedictorian in a small town in Arizona, and something like a month before graduation, he dropped out and left. And the whole town was shocked and horrified, and he realized it was a game and he didn't want to play the game. I've actually been thinking of bringing him to this show, but I could either bring him to the show, or he and your son could be on the show together, and they could talk about valedictorian and plus or minus, and is it a game?
That's interesting. Yeah.
Go ahead, Kath.
I just think that a lot of kids, even though they know it's a game and all these things, right? It's what their peers are doing, and they have a lot of weight on what they're doing. Because I remember when I watched Most Likely to Succeed, and I'm like, yes, I love High Tech High. Yes, they're doing it differently. And then when you listen to the children, they were like, well, but am I going to get into college? Am I going to succeed? Right. So as much as they, they might want to go a different route, they just feel safer. Right. And obviously, if he was getting A's and he's valedictorian, he was really succeeding relatively in that system. So he would have been in it might have been easier for him to get into a college, or a particular college, if that's what he was wanting to do. And maybe he had found his groove. Maybe he's not reaching his potential right now, but he did get a lot of skills that now he feels like, well, if I really apply myself, I can do this. I was a valedictorian with doing 20% of the work. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. That might have been what he felt confident doing. And I think that we actually have enough time to do all the things that we want to do in life, generally.
Well, and that's what it is. There's no hurry. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to be rushing. Yeah, and even why graduate from high school at 18? Why go to college at 18 or 19?
Mm-hmm.
The rush.
Maybe he just wanted the social experience.
And he did.
right? Because when you come out of the school system, as broken as it is, you don't have some of these big milestones like the prom and these things that, you know, that the kids really want to do, because every other kid in the country, or not every, obviously we've got 5 million people now homeschooling, but there are so many people have those. So, you know, with Workspace Sky, we want to be putting these big social milestones inside what we're doing in our 3D online learning venues, so that they can get any learning experience from anywhere in the world, plus have those milestones which are, you know, which are missing outside the school system.
Yeah.
Here in Austin, we gathered all the alternative high schools together and did an alt school prom. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
it was fun, because yeah, you're right, they do need that. They want that and they need that.
Well, and that's the other thing. I think, Michael, you may have coined this term, but the social monopoly of schools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that's the parent who reached out to me last week. 13-year-old boy who doesn't enjoy school but doesn't want to leave because of his friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he's willing to suffer the constant terror.
Grind, yeah, and terror.
Yeah, grind. At minimum, it's a grind in order to not lose connection with his friends. And so, what's the advice there? I haven't talked to this parent yet, but what might you say to that parent?
I would say that it's possible to develop new friends. He can keep his old friends. If he goes to a different kind of program, he can keep his old friends, see them after school and weekends, and he can develop new friends and actually feel more connected to the other kids. And I've seen that. I've got a lot of kids in my schools that they keep friends from old schools. That's totally fine, evenings and weekends. Mm-hmm. And they have new friends in a new social group.
Yeah.
Another beautiful thing that happens also, I mean, I remember when I pulled my daughter out of Montessori when she was 9, and she had a few friends in Montessori, but when she came out, we had a birthday party for her, and there were 60 people there, because we weren't just finding, like, you know, an age mate. We were like hanging out now with families, like 20 different families, and we're inviting all these families, and the actual relationships become a lot stronger, because, you know, that I'm having relationships with the mothers. You know, they have younger siblings. The younger siblings hang out with my youngest son, and
Sure.
She's got a beautiful array of multi-ages, and they're all playing with each other, and without all that competition of she's my friend, she's my friend, right? That you get in this mono age group, these right. mono age groupings that we get at school. You know, the social pressure was really taken off. And it's these friendships that we've grown up with now. So we've been growing up with like really close families, and I know these children very well. They're much more like cousins. So the relationships have actually been a lot deeper, more meaningful, long lasting, and just very trustworthy, non-competitive relationships that have really lasted the distance.
Mm-hmm. I've known a lot of adults who went to very small schools when they were teens, and often they have very close relationships 20, 30 years later to you know, the people they were with, because there is tight, small community can be worth a lot.
Yeah. Also, my daughter, I have to say, and she's actually typing behind me right now, but I have to say that she wasn't really herself at school. Like, she couldn't really relax in that in the school environment. And it wasn't until I pulled her out of school that I really saw her true self coming out of her shell and blossoming, because she got a lot more anxiety in the school system. Mm-hmm. And I think having her in that space and the complete freedom to really choose activities that were just going to light her up really helped her discover who she was and how she liked learning and what she wanted to do, what she cared about, how she was wired. And just the simple act of doing that, you know, was worth it, right? Even at that young age. And now, you know, she's just graduating from Tufts University, and she's about to launch her 3rd book, right? So she's really found her passion, and you know, we haven't looked back since pulling her out of school.
Nice.
What percentage of your clients are Houston area, Matt? Is it like 90% or 10%?
No, and since we moved online, it's probably 20%, 30%. Mm-hmm. Yeah, most of the interactions now are coming online.
Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking this building community locally. You know, we have a lot of families who love what we do, but they want, you know, when can you have a New York? We're trying to create where we have geographical concentration community. People want real life community.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Because-
yeah.
If you're pulling them out in Houston, even if it's down to 20%, maybe you could proactively create community there.
Yeah, and yeah, that's one of the angles we're looking at. It's the concentration, the critical masses are not there, and Houston is a huge area, hundreds of square miles and things. So
Yeah, it's hard to do there.
yeah, it is. So
we've got a question, might be rhetorical, but when else in life will you continue to do something that isn't working over and over other than public school? Yeah, I agree.
well, yeah, and that's back to this Shunker or this hidden brain episode. I mean, the delusion that we tell ourselves is it's all okay. It's all worth it. This is what we do. It's not a big deal. But it is a big deal. It's a lot of time, like we talked about. It's a lot of risk. There's a lot of mental health risk, social risk, yeah. But the delusion is one that it allows us to feel okay each day going to that place and tolerating it and not saying this is not good. I'm going to actually do something about it.
Yeah. Again, I think as more people are exposed to more options and more options are legitimized, and it's tricky because it's kind of vertical K-12, it's also horizontal peer group in high school, it's also post-high school, what kind of college options. One thing I explain to kids over and over again, I know a lot of kids who hate high school then really don't want to go to college, and they say that's fine, but college isn't always, sometimes it is as horrible as high school, but often it's not at all. And so I think we have kids who are learning to hate school in high school who are, eliminating their future because they expect the next step to be the same.
Yeah. Well, I would even go further. I would say they're learning to hate learning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's even more dangerous because now any environment that they're in, the reaction is one of negative. Like, here's something you got to learn on your job. Oh, crap, I can't do that, right? Yep. I've seen people, into the 50s who are deathly afraid of picking up a book.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the problem is that what we're trying to do is give them a monoculture of learning in a school, where as humans, I think we need variety, and that gets us stimulated and also meeting a lot of different people. So, I really like the idea of people working a couple of days a week, in the community and learning. So like the big picture learning schools, for example, they have, their students in actual internships at least 2 days a week, maybe 3 days a week. So they're having a real life, and then they're actually in a school environment, maybe, 10, 20 hours a week. And that way, they can keep in balance, and it's not this monotony that school seems to be. And they get to learn in things that they're passionate about, and they develop skills in the real world. And I think also for higher ed, you could apply that. Maybe they should be working and have university courses as a side to their job, as opposed to a full-time place where kids seem to be baking until they're old enough to actually be in the real workforce.
Right. Yeah.
But my sense is the professors want to control everything and control the time and control the credentials and control the money and everything. My sense is that to some extent teachers and to some extent professors are not eager to let go. I think in both cases there are obstacles to these kinds of programs. Of course, not in the case of big picture learning, that was started in a different way, but I think a lot of people who are either teachers or professors look at it and say, wait, we would lose power, money, and influence. They may consciously or consciously not think that way, but
they're protecting their income streams. And why wouldn't you? I mean, we're a capitalist system, and that's how it works. Everyone's trying to protect their livelihoods and their families' livelihoods. So it's no surprise there that people are protecting their entrenched interests. I think everyone needs to realize that, I think we've got 3,000 or 4,000 different colleges out there. And it's actually pretty easy to get into a college. It's not that difficult to get into a college, right? You can just walk into a community college and start college, and usually they have an articulation agreement so you can get into your state college. Like, it's really very, very, very easy, and it's an illusion, right? Just all of the song and dance is to get the kids into these very few Ivy League schools.
Right. Well, and of course, Caleb went to community college with no high school and then got into Harvard. So he's a case study in how, just walk into community college, forget school, and then if you want to do well, then you can do what you want after that.
You know, I'd like to go back to this Facebook question. Again, the question is, where else in life would you continue to do something that isn't working over and over again, other than the public school? And I actually want to take that and actually pressure test that, because I can think of a couple situations. One is in relationships, a relationship that's not working, but usually one party decides that they can't change it. So they just stop trying, right? Because it's easier to stop pushing on a wall that's not going to give in. You just stop, right? That's so I think that's a place where you continue to do something that's obviously not working. And I think there's a parallel to a kid who doesn't feel like they have any power whatsoever to decide how their day is going to look between the age of 5 and 18.
I would agree, but I would add that there's now a norm that if you're unhappy in your relationship, maybe you should see a therapist or counselor, and the therapist will probably say, can you change it? If not, maybe you should leave. Whereas kids are miserable and we don't have therapists say, can you change it? If not, you should leave. And I would love to get that to that point.
That's interesting. Yeah. And let's talk through, that's kind of the work that we do. I mean, let's talk through the implications. How do you leave in a way that positions you best for your future, and and understanding the real costs of staying, right? I think that's where a therapist would really push on someone in a relationship that's not working. You're paying a heavy price for staying.
Yeah. So, question, I'm also wondering if teachers with our mindsets could collaboratively put our heads together and discuss things that have worked during COVID and prior to adapt traditional curriculums to fit individual students' needs. Any thoughts on masterminds that are existing already in this realm?
So sorry, go on. No, please. No, I was just thinking that Chris Unger is doing this work. He'd be the revolution in education. Like, that would be a really good resource for that. But sorry, yes, please go, Michael.
Well, could you be specific about what kind of advice, in case they don't want to go read Chris Unger's work?
Well, I'm just saying that he's collected, I think he's talked to about 60 different educators and innovators in this area about what they're doing, and what has worked and what hasn't worked. So he's got podcasts. It's called A Revolution in Education, and lots of different sources out there. But I'm very happy to put the question asker in touch.
So I think a lot of this question has to do with how much autonomy teachers have. Actually, going back to the early 20th century, I read about some kid who started high school when he was 16, and he completed 4 years in a year. And basically it was one-room schoolhouse where the teacher said, yep, you know it all, you can go off. And he went off to become a great entrepreneur. But now my sense is a lot of teachers don't have that autonomy. A teacher couldn't take a bright kid and say, yep, you got high school done there. And so it's kind of levels. How much flexibility can you allow for? I'm a big believer in competency. So if the kid can pass the final exam the second week of school, as far as I'm concerned, let him get the credit. How many schools would allow you to get away with that?
My background, my professional background, to the person writing this in, is actually healthcare administration. So I manage medical practices, pediatric medical practices. And if a physician said, this kid, you're doing great, I don't need to see you for 2 years, that physician has the autonomy to make those calls because of whatever they're seeing in that child. But they also can say, you know what, we need to really pay close attention because you're in trouble. We're going to throw money and resources at this issue. Teachers do not have that flexibility. They have a scheduling of when tests are going to happen, what's going to be on the test. And if their child, that student, doesn't do well on that test, regardless of the relative importance of the subjects covered on that test, the teacher's going to be on the hook, the child's going to be on the hook, the school's going to be on the hook. Teachers are treated as technicians, not as professionals.
But I think this is where, and there have been certainly teachers who talk about this, but I've seen actually small rural and small urban districts that are way more humane. And a lot of it is if the district's small enough and you need to make an exception particular kid, you call the right person and say, hey, in this case, we're not going to do that, and you can get away with it. I think the larger the districts become, the more kind of layers of bureaucracy, the more rigidity you come in. And that's when it becomes a really inhuman system.
Agreed.
I have to say, though, in America, like relative to any other country, we have the most freedom. Like if you pull your kid out of school, there are so many different resources, so many different Facebook groups, so many different ways that you can get help to actually create a plan, and it's not rocket science. You can get all the standards. If you want to recreate school, you can, or what was happening, or the best things that were happening at your school, you can get access to all of these things, and then you can eclectically choose from all the resources around the globe what you think would be the best fit based on what you've seen, how your child learns, what worked with them, what didn't work with them. And no other country, as far as I know, has as much freedom as we do here. In
terms of outside the system, or would you also say that?
If you pull your child out, right, and even getting access to tutors, and you can get inexpensive tutoring, and there is much more freedom in our system. Mm-hmm. If you feel like your child is not getting what they need, you can find those resources fairly easily outside the system.
Mm-hmm. My sense is that that's even true within our system. I'm not certain of that. Maybe say in Finland, they have way more freedom within the system, but I've heard of systems maybe in Mexico or Chile where the national curriculum says on October 14th, we're all teaching this. And maybe, East Asia too, mm-hmm. There's like zero freedom in some countries within the system. But I agree, outside the system, we're way many resources.
Yeah. One thing that I actually, back to this question, any thoughts on masterminds? So you talked about Chris Unger. Mm-hmm. I wish Scott were here. So my business partner, Scott Van Beck, was a longtime educator, and he started a school that, this is, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, maybe more, that tried to successfully empower the teachers entirely. In fact, they took the budget mm-hmm. and they said, I think they gave half or more, maybe two-thirds of the budget to the teachers, and said, okay, you are now in charge, and we're going to compensate. They were paid $100,000, and those teachers were creating things, and they were using technology, and they were allowing kids to move in a direction that the kid was interested in, as opposed to the school curriculum, and they saw phenomenal growth. So there's some of it which is just like this, the freedom to try, the freedom to have the risk, which again, this whole issue of risk aversion in education, the risk of trying something different because we know what we're going to do isn't working, right? Most teachers, to your point, Michael, don't have that kind of institutional encouragement or freedom to say, you know what, we're going to throw the rule book out, we're going to try something, and I'm going to put my whole weight behind this thing. Instead, we keep doing the thing that's not working.
Mm-hmm. I've been in teachers' lounges where they talk about there are the teachers that get top ratings, they're the teachers who break the rules all the time, and then there are the teachers of the year. So if you really break the rules all the time, you're a teacher of the year. But if not, you just might get dinged on your evaluations because you're not conforming adequately. But one of the things I love about Scott is my understanding is that experiment where we saw what was possible with much more freedom is part of what ultimately alienated him from the system.
That's
right.
We
saw that excellence is possible where teachers get paid better, students are treated better, and the system won't allow it.
Now, but one of the other things he talks about is that it really required a different type of educator. Mm-hmm. So again, we've talked about this before, but nowadays, the idea of a teacher, the role has shifted. 40, 50 years ago, the data, the information was held inside the brains of the teacher, and at a library, 50 or 10 miles away. Those are only two spots.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore the teacher had to be knowledgeable and then know how to deliver that.
Mm-hmm.
Those days are gone. So now what he had were, he called them learning coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And these were folks who didn't have all the knowledge, but they knew how to help a child learn how to do it themselves. Completely different skill set.
Yep.
And a lot of those students, by the way, after spending 3 years in that school, they went back into a traditional high school, and they really struggled because the traditional high school would say, today, get your book out. We're going to learn chapter 2. And the students were saying, well, I know how to learn. Tell me what the objective is, and
Right.
I'll go ahead and get it done. And I may get it done in a week.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it
Yes,
was.
when you're hiring people these days, like I have a team that I'm training right now to be a high functioning team. And, I really don't care if they've memorized all the dates and all the battles that happened in history. I mean, obviously I'd love them to have an overview of that. What I need is for them to be able to learn any computer program fast, right? Like, can you get up to speed in this in a week? Can you watch YouTube tutorials? Just find the information, right? Then can you integrate that software with that, right? Like, can you anticipate the problems we're going to have with that, right? Do you have the soft skills, right? So that you can work with all these people from all over the world that you don't really know, right? They have to listen really carefully. Can you listen? Can you work virtually? All these things are really, really important if we're going to be a high functioning team, not in person, right? It's got nothing to do with, can they learn this much content in this time and do this well on a test?
That's right.
I want them to be agile thinking so they can jump from this, that, and the other, and then realize what has to happen in the moment, right? And, maybe they're learning that from, doing AP history. And I'm not saying that that's not good content. I think that, it's interesting content. I would like to do that too, but at school, if we're trying to teach them how to prepare them for life, then they have to learn how to work with people, and that has to be at least as big a priority as the content, I would think.
I totally agree. Just to back up to the learning how to learn, the St. John's College, where I went, one of the tutors there said the ideal foreign language exam is you have a foreign language exam on Friday, you don't know what language it's in. Might be Polish, Swahili, Mandarin, you're given a lexicon and a piece of text and you figure it out, you translate it. And I've kind of generalized that to the ideal high school graduation is you're given a technical essay on the end of the week, might be physics, might be biochemistry, might be sociology, you have no idea, figure it out and summarize it. Or to go to your example, Kath, you're given a piece of software, you have a couple of days to figure it out, but you've never seen it before, get in there and figure it out. Because that's what life is like. You just go into the job and figure it out. And the people that can figure it out, they're the ones who are more valuable.
Yeah. Well, so back to this question from the teacher, what we're talking about are all the different ways of learning and instruction that, that really should be happening. So I'll put the question back to the teacher that's watching or listening to this. Could you instruct on those areas? Could you prioritize those areas without getting in trouble? And the answer is almost certainly no. And that means it's not the teacher's fault, it's the system. The system is actually conspiring to make the teacher's life miserable.
Yeah. And the way I describe it, because there are heroes, there are heroic teachers, there are heroic principals, there are heroic superintendents, but we can't have a system that relies on heroes to break rules and to stand up against the rules. That's the system forces. I know people in the system who feel guilty when they're enforcing the rules because they realize it's not good for kids. And then of course we've got policymakers who, in I think a misguided demand for rigor, just piling on more stuff, more tests,
Houston ISD just added, I can't remember how many more days of school, maybe 15 more days of school this year. The idea being that if you want a child to learn more, you got to have more days of school.
Yeah, it's horrible.
And you got to start earlier, and you got to start when they're 3.
Yeah,
it's terrible. It's terrible.
Yeah. So the morale is down, the beatings must continue, that kind of thing.
I like that.
Yeah. So I want to kind of go to one more kind of provocative thing, Matt, since you have maybe the energy and context to study it. So I want to go back to the notion of things like sales, branding, marketing, entrepreneurship, all of these lucrative careers. I don't know what percentage of the economy is related to kind of basically persuasion and talking and that kind of thing, but I think it's significant. I think of real estate salespeople who, make good money in residential, make a shitload of money in commercial. And none of these, sales careers, entrepreneurial careers, branding, marketing, I know people make $400 or $500 an hour for corporate clients, just branding and marketing. But I would say that a lot of those people, going back to genius, and I'll racialize it, I think that there are mostly white people who have networks that get them into these fields if they're maybe creative and gift of gab talkers and so forth, where they can escape school and go on and have fabulous careers. I wonder how many black kids, and we could even make it about black boys, have persuasive skills, gift of gab, could be great talkers, salespeople and so forth, but they're getting in trouble and they don't have the networks to say, hey, let's go do real estate and make a bunch of money.
Yeah.
And so I think that's interesting to do an empirical study of how much talent is being wasted, how many lives are being damaged just by means of not having those skills recognized, cultivated, celebrated in school.
Yeah, going further though, Michael, if you go into many of the kind of the lower income schools, it very much feels prison-like. It's high control environments.
Yeah.
But if you watch the kids and you watch them socialize, you're like, oh my gosh, that kid, he should be running something, right? He should be running a company or marketing or sales or something, right? And the idea of so one of the parents I talked to, African American woman, she talked about what black boys need is a leapfrog strategy, right?
Yep.
No more trying to catch up, because catching up means you're going to be behind the curve once again. You need a leapfrog strategy. So if we could break free of the structure of school, right? And again, I'm talking about the state rules that say if you don't do these things and your school is not good, this A through F grading system that shows that this school is good, this one is not. If we can't move past that, where we can say, all right, that kid, we're in this school, we're going to focus on two things: verbal communication and written communication. That's all we're going to do.
Yep.
And now every kid comes out of here is going to have those superpowers. Yep. That is a leapfrog strategy. But nobody, no school system would tolerate that level of strategy thinking, foresight, right? It's really sad.
I'm gonna recruit you, because you're singing my song. We're gonna make this happen. But just on the prison note, a few years ago, I went to a low-income public high school in Austin, and when the bell rang, it was this, like a prison alarm, and these big metal doors would come down in the middle of the hallways. I mean, it really was like a prison. It was shocking. Yeah, I mean, somebody needs to do a film on this. They are literally like prisons, and it's control. They're all about control, and zero care for. This is where upscale kids go to Waldorf, and it's all beautiful and flowery and everything. No, these are ugly ass prisons.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be beautiful either. It just has to be the environment, one that is nurturing, that's looking for strengths rather than assuming weakness and problems. And again, I get, this is the mantra, right? The system is doing this. It is not teachers. The system is doing this. And so those teachers in those schools, they know that their jobs are on the line, the principal's job is on the line. So they now bring as much control to try to drive that thing forward, rather than saying, hey, you know what, we got kids here who could be incredible salespersons who could start real estate at the age of 10 and learn that business and get into it early, right? All those things are just not even on the radar.
Yeah. And just going to your point, it doesn't need to be beautiful. I've literally started schools in church basements, in strip malls next to the pawn shop, you know, in the suburban thing next to the dentist's office,
Sure.
you know, any space, any room. And yeah, you can give a kids great education with no facilities.
Yep. That's right. Okay, so I'm glad I'm drinking wine because you guys are bringing me down here.
No. We're gonna win. We're gonna win.
We are. It's you know. Oh, sorry, Kat. You say?
No, you know, every time you're talking about prisons, and I'm like thinking about all the schools I've been into, and just you know, it was so controlled in the classroom that when the bell rang, it was just like everyone was just going. The kids were going nuts. It was like there was such a big difference between their behavior when they were controlled to when they were suddenly free, and they just had to let it out because they were so repressed in that space. It was like eugenics. I really felt like I felt it was inhumane.
Yeah.
And you know, it's all done under the name of, well, we're using this strategy to teach this better, so they're going to be, you know, test better. But there's not looking at each child as an individual at all.
Yeah. That's
So
the delusion.
Something Chris Unger wanted to do, and I really love it, is have the students lead this movement. We need students to lead this movement. It occurs to me, maybe we need a YouTube channel where kids can upload, they could submit videos on why school sucks and get footage of actual classroom experiences that suck. And I bet there could be thousands of kids who would submit videos like that. And everybody has a camera. We can document 1,000 ways in which school really sucks. Because adults have no idea. They have no idea.
Yeah. It's
I think a lot of kids don't either. I think a lot of kids have swallowed it as well. Like, you know, I think there's a lot of the children who really like school or will definitely choose it over being at home or just to be with the other children in it. But they don't know any different.
Well, and some of them are in upscale suburban schools where maybe it's less prison-like. You know, that's the idea of the class thing going on there.
There's no question that the more affluent the environment, the more freedom those students get. Now, they don't get freedom to study what they want to study, but they get freedom in the social sides of it. Which is, again, that's the great irony, right? Those who have the most benefits get the most freedoms.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is there somebody writing on the leapfrog thing? Or I know you mentioned, I thought it was yours, but you mentioned somebody else.
No, I was a parent. I mean, I used to do something every summer called a leapfrog summer, where that summer would be entirely focused on things that would prepare the child to really outmaneuver school the following semester. Great story about that. You know, one of the moms who did a lot of the things I was describing, it was like small academic support over the course of the summer. The child really took to it, and by the end of the summer had been mastering, really fell in love with math that summer. And then when she got back to school, the school said, hey, you're in third or fourth grade, and here's the curriculum. And the parent went through like a month and a half of like battling with the school. She knows all this content. She knows this entire book. Let us take the test. Let us show you that she knows it. And the answer was no, she's in fourth grade. This is a fourth grade math curriculum. It was just really rigid. So it was this idea of leapfrog summer, something I'm writing about. And leapfrog strategy is to me, what the education game is all about. It's not skating to the puck, it's skating to where the puck is going to be. And some of what we talked about is where education and learning is going to be.
So Matt's Leapfrog Academy. I see it now.
No, I love that because kids can really accelerate fast. I've seen it in so many different ways. And also I've seen a lot of children who have what I guess you'd call, if you're in school talk, as uneven development. So they might be at 5th grade in math and 10th grade in writing or vice versa. So they struggle no matter where they are. It's either too boring or they're just having their processing is a little slower in different areas. And You know, it's just miserable for these kids. But if you can take them out and get them the right stuff, then they just completely motor ahead.
Right. Yep. That's a leapfrog.
Well, and with that, it is 8 o'clock. And so it's been wonderful to talk to you both. I'm going to start doing a wine with you, Matt, or sometimes your beer. I never know if you're going to be beer or wine. So
it's something with alcohol in it.
Okay.
Yeah, these conversations, they got to get me, give me some energy here.
Get you riled up.
Well, I'll join you one of these evenings. But
that's good.
Thanks to both of you.
Take care, guys.
See you. All right. You take care. Bye.